Okay, let's look at the polynomial functions of degree n. Right? So the polynomial function is a function of this form. If you have a constant an, x to the n, plus an minus 1, this is just another constant, x to the n minus 1, plus and so on, all the way up to a1, which is a constant, x, plus a0 is just a constant term. Right? Since the degree is n, the leading coefficient cannot be 0. So an is not equal to 0. Right? So again, n. So this guy is basically the largest power. Right? This is the degree. Right? Then the number in front of the highest power term, this is called the leading coefficient. Leading coefficient. Alright, so example would be, you don't have to have all the terms, but if you have a, say, function f of x is equal to, alright, 2x to the 7th power, right, plus x to the 5th power, minus 4x to the 4th, minus x plus 5, or something like that. So this is the polynomial function of degree 7, right? So this, in this case, n is equal to 7. Right, and leading coefficients and degrees are useful when it comes to trying to figure out what the graph, ballpark graph is going to look like. Right, so for example, let's say you have a leading coefficient positive, so an is positive. Right, what this tells you is that the right end of the graph is going to point up. So right end is going to always point up if leading coefficient is positive. And on the other hand, if the leading coefficient is negative, so right end is going to point down. All right. Then if you know the degree, if degree n is odd, then it always, the other end, left end, is going to be opposite from the right end. So it's pointing up here. So if n is odd and pointing down on the other end, right? If the right end is pointing down and the left end is going to point up. All right. But if you have degree n which is even, then the left end and the right end is going to have the same behavior. So it's going to point up on this end, right? Since this one, right end points down, so it's left end is going to point down as well, right? And we can't quite sure what's happening in between. So I'll just put some random pictures here. So it goes up and down, and it should look something like that. All right, so we can tell that the leading coefficient is positive and right end is going to point up. All right, and maybe I should say here up and up. All right, so if the leading coefficient negative, it's going to point down and a point down on the left end, right? So maybe I'll just circle here just like before. All right. Then you can see that if n is odd, it's opposite direction and the opposite direction. If n is even, then it's the same direction and the same direction. All right. And what we can get from the degree is going to be maximum number of turning points, right? So if the degree is n, the graph can turn at most n minus 1 times. So it's going to be n minus 1 times. So, so if the degree is 7, it can turn up to 6 times, right? So by knowing that it can turn, n minus 1 time, and the number of zeros, so that's the number of x-intercept, is going to be exactly the same as the degree. So it's n. All right. So let's look at these two examples. All right. So here's the graph. All right. Then you look at the turning point. So here it turns. So it turns here, and it turns here, and it turns here, and it turns here. So it looks like it 1, 2, 3, 4 turns, right? So the smallest possible degree that can have 4 turns would be degree 5, right? Because it's one less than the degree, right? So same way, you have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns, right? Then you have it has 5 turns, and so the smallest degree that can have 5 turns would be 6, right? Also, we have to make sure that here the both end is pointing down, so the degree has to be 6. So it has to be even. And here, this is point down, and this is point up. So it's opposites, so degree has to be odd. All right? And if you look at the right end, since first example, it's pointing up, so the leading coefficient is going to be positive. All right? For the second example, if you look at the right end, it's actually pointing down, so the leading coefficient is negative. All right? So we can get quite a bit of information by knowing the degree and the leading coefficient of a polynomial function. All right, that's it. I hope that this was clear.